So we open up to meet Oliver. He's a filmmaker from Los Angeles and he generally looks pretty stressed. He's at a restaurant giving an interview with his girlfriend Karen for an upcoming project. They head back home and his girlfriend decides to take a shower. Oliver decides himself to watch some online adult videos, but I won't show you what he's watching because I'm sure you guys don't want to see all that. He's surfing through some videos when he comes across something good for some but bad for most. An adult video of his younger sister Aurora, his half-sister if that makes things better. He watches the video over and over again for research purposes of course, trying to assure himself that it's not her, but deep down it seems he enjoys it. He can't stop thinking about her, so he heads over to Madrid where his sister lives with her mother. As soon as he gets there, he heads to her university and crosses paths with her. Aurora is excited about the coincidental reunion and we meet her friend Natalie. Aurora is super happy to see him after such a long time and tells him to stay with her and her mother. He thanks her for the offer but says he will be staying with a friend, as he doesn't seem to have the best relationship with her mother. While headed back to her place, she asks why he headed back to Madrid. He says he came to visit her as he hadn't seen her in such a long time and he missed her. Once there, he says he'll be taking his leave. She gives him her car keys so he can travel easily around the city. The next day, Oliver heads over to meet up with Aurora. They hang out and she gives him a haircut. Oliver finds out she broke up with her longtime boyfriend Abel and has been dating a new guy named Carlos for the past 8 months. He goes to school with her. Aurora's mother Julia calls for her. Once she leaves, Oliver puts a hidden camera in the room to spy on her. He then heads down to have lunch with his sister and her mother. They clearly don't get along and the lunch is a little awkward, but they try their best for Aurora's sake. The next day, Julia picks up Aurora from school since she gave her car to Oliver. She tells him that she shouldn't have gave her car to Oliver as he's selfish and only thinks of himself, which well is starting to seem pretty true. She says that Oliver comes in, takes what he wants from people, then leaves without a trace. Aurora argues back with her mother and says she loves and looks up to her brother. She says that she admires his ability to be independent and do whatever he wants whenever he wants. She admires the fact that he's a free spirit. When Aurora gets home, she receives a gift from Oliver. She heads up to her room to check it out, all the while being recorded by Oliver through his hidden camera. The gift is a record player for those of you that were curious. Oliver wakes up then immediately checks his recordings of Aurora. He watches tape of her hanging out with Carlos. Carlos is begging Aurora to mate. She turns him down and says he's a robot that has no flair or pizzazz. Aurora says she wants some more creativity, something he's not capable of at this time, so he must take his talents elsewhere. As Oliver watches this, he gets hype. He sees his way in. Aurora is at a party with Natalie and Carlos, but she's not really having a good time. As if on cue, Oliver hits her up and invites her to his party. She says bet, and starts to head out. She makes an excuse to Carlos and leaves. Carlos doesn't like that very much. Aurora arrives at Oliver's party and the two start having a great time. They dance, they drink, they do some other activities that YouTube won't allow me to show you, and the two inebriated siblings get close and end up kissing quite passionately. Later, while spying on Aurora, Oliver sees that she's sad. He calls her and apologizes for kissing her. She says she's upset, but not because of that. She has her final exams coming up and well, that's a good enough reason to be upset. If she fails, she'll have her scholarship revoked and she doesn't really want that. She always admired Oliver for being independent and says she would like to spend more time with him, just the two of them. The next day she heads over to where he's staying. He opens the door with an interesting outfit choice. It seems she conveniently arrived when he got out of the shower. Conveniently. They plan on getting some lunch together, but he asks her to wait while he gets dressed. As he's getting dressed, Aurora checks out his camera and sees a homemade adult video of his girlfriend. She looks pretty shook and sets the camera down just as he's ready, and the two of them leave for the restaurant. Aurora tells Oliver she admires his free lifestyle and that Carlos is very controlling. She has fallen out of love with him and wants to move on. She then asks him about the adult video she saw on his camera. He tells her that him and his girlfriend love to film themselves while they get intimate and it gives them thrills. He then asks her if she ever filmed herself getting intimate. She says she did at one point with her ex-boyfriend Abel, but he took the recording with him after they broke up. After lunch, he takes her back and decides to show her all the creepy recordings he took of her. She looks pretty horrified and asks him what the freak is going on. He tells her, alright, chill, and tries to justify his actions. He says since they're half siblings, it's perfectly okay for him to film her in her room without her consent. It's safe to say she isn't very happy and storms off. Some time passes and Aurora has distanced herself from Oliver. She's sunbathing one day outside with Natalie, and Natalie tells her that she would love to mate with Oliver as she thinks he's attractive. Aurora gets upset and tells her to chill as she's not ready to speak about Oliver. She says, alright, my bad. Later that night, she tries to look for the hidden camera in her room. After some time, she finds it, and instead of removing it, she calls her boyfriend Carlos and decides to mate with him on camera, knowing that Oliver is watching. Oliver watches the video. For the next few days, he can't get Aurora out of his mind and watches her videos constantly. One day, Oliver hangs out with Aurora and her friends in the woods. Aurora still isn't very happy with him and says she needs to relieve herself. Oliver follows her and starts getting pretty handsy. She begins to push him away, but he does not relent. Uh-oh, this is not looking good. Oh wait, they begin to kiss passionately and we aren't the only ones watching. Carlos gets a front row seat as he seems to have followed them, which fair, his girlfriend went to use a restroom and was immediately followed by her creepy brother. Carlos decides to say nothing and walks away. Later that night, Aurora and Oliver mate in her car. After they finish, she feels pretty guilty because, well, it's her brother and she has a boyfriend. Just major L's all around. Oliver, who's in the exact same situation, seems fine though. She begins to cry and asks Oliver to take her home. Once she gets home, her mom starts putting the hands on her, like really letting her have it. So it turns out Carlos snitched Aurora out to her mom about what he saw in the woods. Unlucky. Meanwhile, when Oliver gets home, Carlos beats the incest out of him. Oh, and he brought a bat. He then decides to destroy all of Oliver's things. Wow, this man plotted his revenge and executed. Aurora's mom takes her to a psychologist, which, well, fair. Aurora says it's complicated. She's in love with both Carlos and Oliver, and she did nothing wrong by sleeping with him. Back at school, it turns out Carlos told everyone about her relationship with her brother, and people began to whisper behind her back. Aurora can't focus and begins to get very upset. Back at Oliver's, his laptop is broken, but he's dedicated to stalking his sister, so he watches her on a projector. He tries calling her, but since Aurora's mom grounded her, she took her phone. She answers and tells Oliver that he has some nerve calling. She suggests he leaves the country or he's gonna have a whole lot of problems. Furthermore, if she catches him around Aurora, she will full-on murder him. Then she hangs up. Later, Aurora's mom talks to Aurora and tries to convince her to stay away from Oliver, all while he watches from his hidden camera, but Aurora says she's in love with him. Aurora's mom is really concerned for her and says she will help her. A few days later, and Aurora is still not allowed to go anywhere but to see her psychologist along with her mother. She tells her psychologist that she has been attracted to Oliver since she was a kid. She never intended to do anything, but when Oliver made his advances, she couldn't control herself. She's heading home with her mother when she suddenly escapes. She makes a run for it and heads to Oliver's place. When she gets there, something seems off. She heads inside to see her best friend Natalie putting her clothes back on. Aurora realizes as her entire world was crashing around her the whole time Oliver was mating with her best friend. She also realizes that he never loved her the way she did and she was just another challenge he wanted to conquer. It turns out her mother was correct. A heartbroken Aurora walks home and decides to cut all ties with Oliver. At home, Aurora cuts some of her hair and removes the hidden camera, effectively moving on with her life. She spends her time studying and gives it her all during her final exams. A few days later, Oliver gets a package. It's Aurora's hair. I guess this means that their relationship is over for good and he will never see her again. Oliver looks at himself in the mirror and this is where our story ends. And that's the end of our show, ladies and gentlemen. If you like this recap, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more videos like this one. Take care.